Hello, and welcome to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host and City Manager, Doug Bartosh, and I'm here today with Mr. Morgan Scott, who's our Community Development Manager, and basically responsible for a lot of roadway projects and really a lot of different projects in the city. And we certainly have a lot of projects going on right now, which is not unusual for the summer months. But probably one that is going to impact a lot of people is the kind of the complete reconstruction of Mingus Avenue from Willard Street all the way down to Main. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about this, because obviously we've already seen construction going on down there and detours and roadways being removed and those kind of things. So kind of talk about what the process is right now and then what people can expect as time goes on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Mingus Avenue is a really exciting project, obviously, because as you know, that's our busiest street in town. Busier than Main Street, obviously not as busy as the State Highway, but it's our busiest city street. And that's mostly due to all the activity going on Mingus Avenue. You've got the schools, the post office, both city courts, the new rec center, the police department, the fire department, and the list goes on.
And obviously a lot of people going to the hospital, the medical center, use Mingus as well. So. Yep,
and it's also the new cut through. You can get all the way out to I-17 since the extension went in 2003. You can get all the way out to I-17 on it. So it's become a busy street, and it's unfortunately in one of our worst conditions. So it is really exciting to get this rebuilt. Yeah. We do have federal money for one project. And a lot of people keep asking me, why are we breaking this into two projects? Isn't that more expensive? Although, yes, it is more expensive to do two projects if it was all local money. We do actually have federal money. We have $845,000 in federal money. So what we try to do is we try to do one project as small as possible for that $845,000. And the reason, Doug, that federal projects tend to cost more is a couple reasons. There's environmental costs. That's $30,000 off the top. There's requirements for procurement of contractors. There's requirements on different wages you're going to pay people. So that's why those federal projects tend to cost more. And that's why we broke this up.
And this is a good example of why people complain about over-regulation. In essence, when we get federal dollars, because of regulations associated with those federal dollars, it ends up costing us 25-30% more to use federal dollars to do those projects, versus if we're just using federal or city money, we don't have to follow all of those regulations. And so that's why we split it up. Makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Actually saves us money.
It will save us money. The more we can do with local money, the bigger that project is, and the smaller we can do with the federal money, the more money we'll save. And as far as regulations go, for instance, the Davis-Bacon Act, that requires that the contractor cannot determine their own wages. It is a set wage. The federal government will tell the contractor on that job what they will pay their employees. So that's just one example of the many regulations that will go into the federal project. But it is good news. We do have $845,000 in federal money that we can put towards that project. Also, as you mentioned, there's already activity going on in the area. None of that's technically related directly to the road project. It's actually local utility companies getting ready for our road project. In order to protect our roads, we have a city ordinance that says once a road is paved, 5 years, the pavement can't be cut. So we go ahead of time, we tell all the utility companies they've got to get in, they've got to get all their infrastructure improved. So that's what you're seeing right now. You've seen APS, CenturyLink, I believe, Cable One have all been in there. Right now, there's a brand new 8-inch water line going in that the City of Cottonwood Water Department's putting in. So that's actually what's out there today. And there's a very large crossing right there at 6th and Mingus. So actually, they're going to unfortunately have to shut down that intersection for about a week. At least we're shutting down North 6th Street. Unfortunate timing, the 4th of July weekend. We have fortunately worked with all the local businesses, the police department, the fire department, so we've got them all access, but it still is unfortunate timing for our non-locals who might be in the area.
You know, and we can talk a little bit about that, because there really are some easy detours around that. You can either go down Aspen to 7th to get back to Mingus, or you can take Brian Mickelson Parkway, which is a beautiful drive through the park, by the library, by the recreation center, and it gets you right back on Mingus Avenue, depending on whether you're going east or west on Mingus, you can use either one of those. And we'll have detour signs out there soon to get those, get people working in or driving in those directions. So in terms of the timing, I know we're getting the water line in. We got to get that in before they come in and start that section between roughly Willard and about 8th Street. And so when will that work start then?
Absolutely. That's actually out for bid right now. So contractors' bids are due August, don't hold me to this, August 11th, I believe, basically early August. At that point, this is actually a state project administered by the state. It'll go to the state will award to the contractor. So you can expect to see the reconstruction of the road project start, I would estimate mid to late September. They then have 170 working days. Now, a working day is obviously different than a calendar day. That's about 34 weeks. That could put them into potentially May. I do expect the work to be shorter than that. September to May sounds like a long time. I expect it to be shorter than that, but that is their contract time, would be September to May. And again, that's Willard to 8th Street. And on that topic, a lot of people ask, where's 8th Street? Because it's not a delineated street. It's actually a city right-of-way. It's a city wash. It's located between the Aspen Ridge Apartments and the Casa del Sol condominiums. Right. And that's the approximate location of where these two projects will stop and start.
And let's talk about when the next one, I know the next phase from 8th to Main Street is in design. And I assume the hope is to be able to basically stop one project or finish one project and start the other project.
That's definitely the goal. In fact, what we'd like to do is advertise one while the other one is still under construction. So hopefully that contractor gives us a lot better bids. And a lot better prices. That's our goal, to aim for that. So the other project is about a 30% design. Right now we actually have two concepts at 30% design that we'd like to bring out to the public, probably early September, and then bring to our city council, say mid-September. And what we'd like to do, because this is all local money, we can be a lot more flexible with the needs of our local citizens. We'd like to consider pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, transit facilities. Drainage is going to be a major concern on the next project, so we're working with the county flood control, county public works, to make sure that drainage is going to work and everything is going to be a better product. So we get to be a little more flexible on the design because it's local funds. So we're at the 30% design. So again, we'd like to get direction from the city council, say mid-September. That would allow us to wrap up the entire 100% design by the end of the year, which means we could be out construction in January, which means you could be under construction, starting construction, say February or March, which is nice because the other project should be wrapping up in May. So we'll get those bids right while the other project is in place. So hopefully as the other project's wrapping up, this project will be kicking off.
And so let's talk about what we're doing. I mean, what is this road going to look like when it's done?
Yep, absolutely bike lanes, curb, gutter. Quite a bit of Mingus Avenue, you've probably noticed, has what they call a rural edge. No curb and gutter, just asphalt, so not very good defined drainage features. So curb and gutter along the entire portion of the street. 6-foot wide sidewalks. In fact, as another example of what the federal project doesn't allow us to do and the local project does, on the local project we may be able to have what they call a meandering sidewalk with kind of a greenery landscaped area in between. It'll be able to be really nice. So that may happen on the locally funded project 8th Street to Main Street. But curb, gutter, sidewalks, bike lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. We will have a center turn lane the entire project Willard to 8th. And we'll have a center turn lane in portions, 8th to Main. We may, in order to cut costs, reduce speeds, and a few other things, this is part of what we'll bring to the public and the city council, we may look at narrowing down the road in some portions 8th to Main, maybe not having that center turn lane the entire section. That's part of what we're looking at right now.
And kind of a traffic calming approach to get people to slow down. And so I think it is important too to recognize that bike transportation is important in the city, and we want to accommodate both bike transportation and pedestrian transportation. And so that's why I think it's important that we're looking at not only redoing the street, but obviously accommodating bicycle and pedestrian traffic as well.
Yep. We've also brought in our bicycle advisory committee. They've already reviewed the 30% designs. We've got their input. The county health department, which is active in our bicycle advisory committee, as well as the police department and fire department, because when we're designing a road, it's not just for vehicles. We've got to take all those into consideration. So we'll also bring our planning and zoning department into the review of the design.
So obviously the big question people are going to have is being able to still access Mingus Avenue during the construction period, those kind of things. And obviously we got this started right after school got out, but we're still going to impact school traffic. The businesses along there are going to be impacted by this. What do we need to tell people in terms of access on Mingus Avenue?
Well, a couple of fortunate things. Right now you're seeing the road project and the utility projects. Fortunately, that is all happening during the summer months when school's not as active, but unfortunately part of the road project will definitely be while school's in place. So we will require some patience from people, but we also will maintain access to businesses at all times, other than maybe some very brief times while we're paving. But we will maintain access to businesses throughout the corridor. One of the fortunate things about Mingus Avenue is we've got a lot of room. Right today there's 3 lanes, which means we can detour people around. We can get traffic out of the way and still maintain access to businesses and residences, as opposed to a 2-lane road when we occasionally have to shut it down, as we did on 12th Street. So that's one of the major benefits of the width of Mingus Avenue.
And I think that's an important point too, is obviously, when you have construction projects like this, it can impact those businesses. So we really encourage our citizens, to, as Mr. Scott said, try and be patient. It'll be a nice improvement once it's done. It's definitely something that needs to be done, but let's not forget our businesses along that area, and make sure you get out there and support them as well during this period of time. And a lot of people have to go to the post office anyway, and so if you're down there, you got to go to the post office and help out one of those businesses and stop and buy something. Let's go ahead and take our first break, and then we'll come back and talk about some other projects that are going on.
You're gonna take good care of him, right?
Oh, like he was my own dog. Trust me. Oh, that's good.
Not my baby!
Sorry.
You don't want your groomer distracted. No one wants you distracted behind the wheel. It only takes 1 second to change your life forever. Distracted driving involves anything that takes your focus off the road.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
To make a difference, we must stand together.
Stand with me. Be drug-free. Supporting our families and listening to our teens.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
We are all one. No one is immune.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
Let's stand together for a healthier community.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
Welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host, Doug Bartosh, and I'm here today with Morgan Scott, and we're talking city projects. We just talked about Mingus Avenue, and it's going to be under construction for probably almost a year. Well, probably even a little more than a year potentially. But we'll try and get through it as quickly as we can. You'll still have access on that roadway, and again, support those businesses along there. We have another project that's going on right next to Mingus Avenue. And it's a flood control project, predominantly involving Cottonwood villages. Talk about that project a little bit.
Yep, and I know that hasn't got the same attention as Mingus Avenue. Obviously doesn't impact as many people as Mingus Avenue, but from a engineering and flood control perspective, it's actually just as important. This is actually wrapping up what's close to a 13 to 15-year-old project. You may remember Railroad Wash used to run all the way through all the residences between the hospital and 6th Street. In fact, the county building was in the floodplain. I think there were about 35 residences in the floodplain, and the city, with county flood control money, constructed Railroad Wash along Willard Street and Mingus Avenue, taking those 35 residences out of the floodplain. That was a great project, and most people assume we're wrapped up and done, even though we've had to do it in multiple phases. The final phase is what we're working on right now. Unfortunately, when we did that, it left Cottonwood Village within the floodplain. This project we're working on right now, wrapping up today as a matter of fact, they are out there paving and final sign-offs today. We'll take Cottonwood Village out of the floodplain, and we'll wrap up that project. So again, not as impactful to the rest of the public, but when you look at the project as a whole that goes all the way back to 2002, it's been a great project. We've taken 35 residences out of the floodplain, and now we're taking the final structure out of the floodplain.
You know, and it's important to recognize too that as residents of Cottonwood, we all pay on our property tax into the flood control district. So what we're doing is we're trying to leverage those dollars back here to the city and taking care of some of these flood issues. I know another one that we're getting funding for is Blowout Wash. And talk a little bit about that project. That'll be a project that starts hopefully after the beginning of the budget year, which is July 1st. So what are they going to do down there?
Yeah, Blowout Wash in the Old Town District, or also sometimes called Del Monte Wash. It'll be a redelineation of that floodplain. That floodplain was studied back in the 70s and early 80s, and the methods that they used to study that floodplain were very conservative. They didn't do a detailed study of the wash. They said, here's what we think could happen, here's kind of worst case scenario, and they gave a very broad, and as anybody who's seen the floodplain map in Old Town, it just kind of blurts out and encapsulates all of Old Town. It's not a very detailed study. So the county flood control, at no cost to the city, but again, it's what our taxpayers, what our citizens are already paying into.
Right.
County flood control has given us a $150,000 grant. Now that project's going to come in 3 phases. The first $150,000 phase is just a study of what's there. What does the floodplain actually look like in a more detailed study? That'll be the first phase. After that study is done, we'll probably sit back down with the city council, maybe even a public meeting, and we'll say, okay, here's what it looks like. Now let's talk about what are a few options to make it better. You know, maybe we could spend X dollars to get this many people out of the floodplain. We could spend X dollars to get this many more people out of the floodplain. What do we want to do? And that'll be kind of phase 2 of the project. And then the final phase of the project will be maybe an actual construction project, an actual getting in there, spending that money, physical improvements, and then finally redelineating the actual floodplain and hopefully actually removing structures from the floodplain. I do want to emphasize, we're probably not going to get everybody in Old Town out of the floodplain. I think a lot of people are thinking, oh good, I'll be done. We will be able to drastically reduce the number of people in Old Town in the floodplain. Not everyone will be coming out of the floodplain, but the good news is it will be more defined, which means the people who need insurance will be able to get the insurance they need, and the people who don't need that flood insurance will be able to alleviate themselves of that.
Well, you know, and I think that's an important point is people may be asking, you know, why do we do these projects? And the reality is, one, it makes people safer if they're out of a floodplain. But number 2 is it does cost them. If you live in a floodplain, generally you're paying flood insurance, which can be relatively expensive. And so, you know, that's the reason we do these projects. But first and foremost, it's to make people safer as they do this. So other projects we've got going on, I know we've got sidewalks going in on Cottonwood Street. Talk about that project a little bit.
This is Cottonwood Street right in front of Safeway. So we are, let's see, east of 89A and Main Street, between Main Street and Cove Parkway, right in front of north of the Safeway shopping complex. That'll be sidewalks both sides of the road. That is a grant from the Arizona Department of Transportation. It's actually through our transit, believe it or not. They went out, our transit department went out and got this grant as enhancements to both their bus shelters on the facility, but that's being wrapped up, should be wrapped up around the beginning of August.
Okay, good. And it's really to provide access for people who ride the bus and live along Cottonwood Street or make use of the shopping center. They'll actually have a sidewalk to walk on at this point, so that's a good thing.
Yep.
I know another project we've got going on is the Civic Center. And you're not as deeply involved as that as you once were, but again, a project that has leveraged federal dollars that we all pay taxes for, leverage those federal dollars back here to Cottonwood, and we're using them to renovate to restore the old Civic Center down in Old Town, which was it's that big stone building that was built in 1939 by the WPA, and it's gotten a tremendous amount of use over the years. But it's time to go back in and kind of rehab it, bring it back to its more of its original condition, and that's a project that I think is worth about $700,000 to $800,000 that we're going to put into this building. And we've already done some mitigation in terms of asbestos and lead to make the building safer. And so that's a project that should actually be getting started here in the next, I would say, 30, 45 days. So that'll be moving along. Yep. We've got, I've been bugging you about restriping the streets, yep. And so that'll be coming up here pretty soon, which generally is kind of non-intrusive. I mean, they just come in and stripe, and nobody really notices it too much, other than the lines look a lot brighter. Yep. And then we've got about $750,000 this year for street maintenance. And I know we have a list of streets. We usually like to get these projects done during the hot months. Yep. And so any idea at this point, if you can recall from the list, what streets or areas we may be recommending to the City Council for maintenance?
We're definitely going to be looking at Main Street. Although Main Street's in good shape, we'd like to look at some safety improvements we could do along Main Street. So that's one potential use. One thing I really like to see, and I know we're kind of moving in this direction, is some of our newer streets. A lot of people say, why are we putting seals on our newer streets? Shouldn't we put that money into the older streets? Although that makes sense, but sometimes the older streets, they need reconstruction. They don't need a seal. Whereas if we put a seal on our new streets, we can get them to last another 5, 10, maybe even 15 years longer than they would have normally. So it'll keep our newer streets in better shape for longer. So we will probably look at some of the relatively newer streets, Mingus Avenue and those kind of streets, in addition to Main Street.
So and that's kind of an important thing. I mean, when we talk about street maintenance, obviously what we're trying to do is keep the integrity of the asphalt intact, and there's different options that we use based on the condition of the street. Talk a little bit about those options.
Absolutely. So several different options. Most of us think of an asphalt street, which is what most of our major collector streets are laid down. Several inches of asphalt. It's both structural as well as protective of the undergrounding sub-base, which is really the structural portion of the road. But after that, when we get into preservation, you start looking at seals, everything from a fog seal. A fog seal to most people won't look much more than paint. It'll kind of look like they're putting black paint down. It is a little bit more than paint. It's actually an oil that rejuvenates the asphalt a little bit. It'll hold a lot of what they call the fines of the asphalt in place, so you'll get a smoother road for longer. And again, that to most people will mostly look like paint. From there, you can move into something called a chip seal. Now, a chip seal is something the City of Cottonwood's used a lot. What's great about a chip seal is it's relatively inexpensive, and it also adds a structural component to the road. So we do like using that. We are looking at the possibility of we may not be able to use that due to some new federal regulations, unfortunately. So then the third option, which is a more expensive option, is kind of a mix between a fog seal, basically with a sand mixed in, and it's called a slurry seal. It goes down a little bit thicker than a fog seal, but again, it's not much more than oil and sand mixed together, and you'll get anywhere from an 1/8 to a 1/4 inch thick slurry seal, and you can put that down. What's great about a slurry seal, they do look great. You get done with the slurry seal, and that road will look in excellent condition. Unfortunately, slurry seals don't tend to last very long. They don't last nearly as long as a chip seal. So there's pros and cons to each, but those are 3 of the options we've considered. You can also do an overlay. An overlay is basically you'll put 1 inch of asphalt on a relatively good road. We haven't done that in a while, but that's another option.
You know, and ultimately the goal is to try and keep the moisture from getting in underneath the asphalt, which is what creates potholes and those kind of things. So that's what's important. So we'll be out doing roadway maintenance, hopefully sometime this summer, I imagine. But let's go ahead and take our next break and then come back and join us, and we'll cover a couple more projects that are going on in the city of Cottonwood.
You're gonna take good care of him, right?
Oh, like he was my own dog. Trust me. That's good.
Not my baby!
Sorry.
You don't want your groomer distracted. No one wants you distracted behind the wheel. It only takes 1 second to change your life forever. Distracted driving involves anything that takes your focus off the road.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
To make a difference, we must stand together.
Stand with me. Be drug-free. Supporting our families and listening to our teens.
Stand with me, be drug-free.
Stand with me, be drug-free.
We are all one. No one is immune.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
Let's stand together for a healthier community.
Stand with me. Be drug-free.
We'll go through those. Welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host, Doug Bartosh, and we're here with Morgan Scott talking about city projects. And we've covered Mingus Avenue, a couple of flood projects, a sidewalk project, street maintenance. We also have, I think, $100,000 this year to add sidewalks where we need them. And so we'll be looking at that as well. What other projects we've got going on? We've got a couple minutes here. If you can kind of just lay out the projects and what we hope to do with them.
Absolutely. So one other big project we got going on that's actually no local money is going into this. It's 100% flood control, which again our citizens pay into, but we get it back from the flood control district. We have $400,000 right now to do a citywide drainage study. Now, how does that impact our citizens? That'll impact the citizens from It'll impact every roadside drainage study. So if someone wants to put a culvert in front of their house, that study will already be done. We already know what flow is in front of their house. We'll know the velocities. We'll also be able to identify future flood control projects. Where are our big flood control issues right now? How do we prioritize them? If a development wants to come in, we have that flood study in place. Something else we'll do is we'll require future developments to add to the study. So the study will stay up to date so we don't have to redo it again in, say, 5 years.
Good.
So that's a $400,000 project, and we're hopefully wrapping that up by the end of this year.
Okay. What else?
Another project we have at the airport, which may not impact a lot of our citizens, but definitely our users and some other people who want to see the business, who want to see commercial activity in the area grow. The airport's obviously great for that, and it's great for anybody looking to come to the area. Is our airport apron reconstruction project. We actually have it's approximately a $95,000 grant from both the Federal Aviation Administration and the Arizona Department of Transportation. The city is kicking in 5% of this cost, but that is out to bid right now. We expect that to be about $1.5 million. In fact, that'll be going to City Council here in the near future for award of that contract. So that could be under construction around August, and that'll be reconstructing phase 2 of our airport apron, which has been an important project to a lot of our pilots for several years now.
Yeah. Yep. And how about, you mentioned the transfer station. What's going on up there?
Yes, I know there's a lot of citizens who are concerned about our transfer station. We had to, in order to cut some money, we had to cut our hours back. And a lot of people say, why'd you cut the hours? Fortunately, most of them have been understanding when we explained it was either the transfer station is supposed to be self-sustaining, so it was either raise prices or cut hours. So a lot of them kind of understand when you explain it that way. They didn't want to pay higher prices, so we did have to cut our hours. But what we're looking at doing is moving forward with a private company who would come in, make the improvements necessary. We are going to require they stay open a certain amount per week. We are going to require they give Cottonwood citizens a discount. So we are hoping to get that, what we call a request for proposals, out here probably mid-July. So we can get that out, get it advertised, and maybe get somebody in who can run the transfer station more hours, more efficiently, and hopefully at a less cost to the city general fund.
Good. As you can see, there's a lot going on in the city, and this is one department. So every department out there has many projects that they're working on, but these are the ones that tend to impact citizens. Or if you see them out there, you may have some curiosity and just want to know what's going on. And anytime you see something like that and you're interested in knowing, don't hesitate to give us a call. We'd be happy to talk to you about any project that's going on, and certainly If you want an idea of those projects that are planned, our budget documents always list those items that are anticipated to be funded during the budget year and go from there. Thank you for joining us on Inside Cottonwood, and come back and join us again.